Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mayor of Leipzig, Mr. President of the ITF, Ministers, Vice Ministers, Secretary of State, European Commissioner, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Pat Cox, and it's my great privilege for the next 2 hours to moderate this opening session of the International Transport Forum Leipzig 2019. Our theme, as you know, connecting global regions for sustainable economic growth. And that connectivity is being explored and will be explored in the coming days in 55 events and working sessions. And it's connectivity in all of its forms. It is digital connectivity, it is international and institutional connectivity, it's at the global, the regional, the intra-regional, the cross-border. All of those elements will be explored. We're dealing, of course, with an era with a strong focus on sustainable mobility, a mobility that brings people together, a mobility that brings our goods to markets, a mobility that can broaden our horizons and open for all of us new and sustainable opportunities. We have over 70 countries participating here in these few days. We've over 1,000 participants, and it is my great pleasure now, on behalf of the International Transport Forum, to invite its Secretary General, Young Tai Kim, please, to give his opening remark.
We are here again, and Vice Minister Kim, Minister Scheuer, Ministers and Excellencies, and Mayor of Leipzig, Mr. Jung, distinguished guests, welcome to the 2019 Summit of the International Transport Forum. Herzlich willkommen here in Leipzig. 환영합니다. 라이프치에 오신 것을 환영합니다. That's what I said. The same thing in Korean. Welcome to a truly global event. I'm proud to say that 72 nations are present today, with more than 1,100 delegates. 41 ministers and vice ministers are attending. More than 40 countries, companies, and organizations are hosting exhibitions and side events. We have generous sponsorship from our regional partner Saxony, from our gold sponsor DECRA, and silver sponsors Bombardier and Toll Collect. Thank you all for coming from the four corners of the earth to join our debate and for your ongoing support. Our common purpose of the coming 3 days is to seek ways to better connect our world, to improve transport links and foster regional integration through better connectivity. Connecting people with each other is good for prosperity, and connecting people with each other is good for peace. Where distance can be overcome easily, people trade more, people talk more, people see more, exchange more. The better connections make better lives. Connectivity is such a vast topic with so many different aspects. You will find all of them reflected in the extremely rich summit program. We'll talk about mobility as a service, so-called MaaS. How can we offer citizens tailor-made mobility? We'll talk about connecting vehicles and infrastructure, how to set standards, ensure safety and security, and fund investments. We'll talk about ways to better connect world regions by ship, air, and rail. We'll talk about much more. Connectivity is one of the mega trends of our century. The increase in connectivity is reshaping the world far beyond the transport sector. Because of this, better physical connections in the 21st century require us to connect policies more effectively. Electronic mobility makes little sense without clean energy production. Connected driving won't work properly without considering the telecommunication dimension. Reducing congestion and air pollution in cities requires joint policies for transport, housing, and commercial development. We need to leave old silos and come together to connect our thinking so we can solve the global problems together. Better transport is about better physical connections, of course, but it all has to start by connecting our minds. And that's what we do here at the summit. For 3 days, we live the motto of the International Transport Forum, Global Dialogue for Better Transport. I invite you all to join the conversation, and I do hope that we will go back home filled with more insight, inspiration, and more ideas. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. It's now my great pleasure to invite your fellow countrymen on this occasion on behalf of the Korean Presidency of the International Transport Forum and the Vice Minister for Land, Infrastructure and Transport of Korea, Young Ryol Kim, please to make his introductory remark.
Hello. Very nice to meet you, everyone. I would like to deliver my speech in Korean, so if you could kindly put on your earphones. Originally, Minister of Land and Transport of Korea, Hyun-mi Kim, was scheduled to be here today, but there have been some unexpected developments in Korea domestically, so I am here on her behalf as Vice Minister of Land and Transport. She attended the annual event of ITF last year, so she is very well aware of the importance and significance of this annual event. So I would like to first apologize on her behalf, but also assure you that even though she's not here with us, she fully recognizes the meaningful discussions that will be taking place today. So I kindly ask for your understanding on this part. Today we are here in this beautiful city of Leipzig. This is a particularly meaningful year for me as Korea is the chair of ITF conference. On the one hand, I find myself humbled at the confidence and trust shown by all of you, and on the other, I'm excited at the vision and insights we will be sharing amongst ourselves over the next 3 days. This year marks the 67th anniversary of ITF, a renowned authority in the field of transport. For each member, it has provided a platform through which it can share and discuss pressing issues on transport, while on an international level, it has set the tone for a global transport agenda, contributing to international transport policies. Korea has had ties with ITF since year 2000 and adopted the principles of ITF to reduce the number of traffic accidents, including Vision Zero, and reducing the speed of vehicles on the road. This has led to tangible results, such as a 10% drop in the number of deaths by traffic accidents last year alone. In early 2017, Korea became the first non-European country to serve as chair to ITF. Honorable guests, connectivity between two regions goes far beyond physical connection or enabling movement between two places. Bridges that connect the islands to the mainland offer a chance for more humane life. Roads that allow us to travel far beyond the high mountains have connected us to the outside world, opening up new horizons. Just as the Silk Road in ancient times brought civilizations of East and West and cultures together, increased connectivity of transport infrastructure in today's world helps us make the most of resources and opportunities for investment and growth. Needless to say, transport infrastructure closes the gap between different social classes, regions, and income levels, helping us ensure no one is left behind. In that sense, it is the essential groundwork for more inclusive growth. The movement of people and resources leads to transactions of value and increased connectivity in life, blurring borders and barriers and facilitating communication and understanding. This naturally helps generate more regional stability and world peace. Honorable guests, today's world is undergoing fast change in information technology, artificial intelligence, and biotechnology, thanks to astounding technological progress. The area of transport, too, has been a beneficiary of such progress. Undersea tunnels that connect continents, large-scale bridges, self-driving cars, and increased options for personal flight mobility are no longer a thing of our imagination. With internet technology combined, the world is becoming interconnected than ever. As travel times are shortened, growth is shared by the global community, and we are feeling closer than ever. Increased connectivity, however, does not necessarily equate with co-prosperity. Regional gaps can threaten coexistence. We should not forget that at times in history, roads were used for invasion and exploitation. Only through trust and better communication can we rid ourselves of this risk. Now, I would like to cite an expression by the Japanese novelist Siono Nanami, a novel laureate. She is well known for the stories of romance, and she put it this way, that to lay down roads is more than connecting one place to another, that it is about allowing someone to come in from outside and someone to venture out by taking those roads. If we are afraid of invasion by external forces or of changes, we cannot open up new roads. To lay down roads that lead to far-flung places is to connect us together, to build trust, and commit ourselves to joint prosperity and growth. Honorable guests, the Korean Peninsula is located at the far east tip of the Asian continent. It is in fact directly connected to the Eurasian continent, but the political situations have thus far made it difficult to forge a direct land transport link to the continent. But Korea is about to change now in this aspect, first by connecting North and South Korea through transport. This will allow us to take our first steps to co-prosperity. The two Koreas have held 3 summits where they have promised that not only will railroads be connected, but joint efforts will be made for peace and prosperity to open up a new chapter in history. As part of such efforts, we conducted a joint survey on roads and railways last year and had a groundbreaking ceremony to connect these transport links and bring them up to date with the latest technology. Our joining of the International Railway Cooperation Body with a consensus of existing member countries around the world, I believe, is already testament to our first step towards linking the Eurasian continent through railways and ultimately achieving world peace and prosperity. As noted earlier, what increased connectivity can bring lies in what we strive for. It can mean improved trust and harmony for one, while it can mean increased chances for exploitation or plunder for another. This is why ITF, that promotes win-win talks, regional and cooperation, Regional cooperation is all the more important, so I look forward to further guidance and insight from ITF. Thank you.
Vice Minister, thank you for that message. And I think a really important message about the need for trust and communications and your emphasis on the win-win aspect of the connectivity agenda, which I'm sure, no doubt, we will return to on our panels later this afternoon. Every presidency, as you know, for those of you who are regular attendees at Leipzig, gives an opportunity to the host presidency to share a little glimpse of who they are. And so we're about now to enter a few minutes of Korea presenting itself to us in a visual presentation that looks at some of the developments and investments in Korea over the years, the purpose of those, and also brings our attention to some of the urgent challenges which we share. And that visual presentation will be followed by a cultural presentation which I shall explain to you after the event. But now let us please take a look at the video presentation.
Roads. The dawn of civilization began with roads, connecting people to people, cities to cities, and passing through countries around the world. Over the mountains, flying through the sky, connecting all of us together as one. We are undergoing a huge paradigm shift today. Traditional roads are ready to embrace new values. Roads for the new era, the era of peace, coexistence, and brighter future for all. It is time for us to build roads befitting a new era. "70 years ago, this city was struggling to rise from the rubbles of war. But now, it stands as a global city in its own right. Korea. Over the last 70 years, Korea has fleshed out a transport infrastructure policy that focuses on efficiency and intermodalism. Korea achieved a remarkable economic growth based on physical connectivity in transport. Korea's transport infrastructure is being recognized as the most successful for many countries. Raising awareness of sustainability and making a remarkable advance in technology have become our goals to achieve in the new era and the paradigm for national growth. We have high hopes for reopening the railway links between North and South Korea, which will serve as our first step towards increasing connectivity throughout the Eurasian continent. Less time to get to your destination means we are brought closer together. We are turning to give serious thought to what dignified human life means. Korea, through its various initiatives and best practice, has made a mark on the international scene. We are gathered here today for improved transport and better lives. The International Transport Forum will present a beautifully integrated world to our future generations. Transport connectivity for regional integration, Leipzig, Germany.
Well, that captured all of our hearts. What a wonderful piece of choreography, fusing the traditional and the modern. It was really very elevating and fantastic to see. I've been asked just to give you a little explanation. The dance in its traditional form that we've just seen is known as Hwagwan Mu. The Korean word Hwagwan means a crown of beauty, and Mu means a dance. And so the Hwagwan Mu refers to a dancer with a flowered crown. And traditionally, and of course today also, it was performed to wish blessings and well-being on those who managed to observe it. So please again, a warm round of appreciation for that wonderful cultural interlude. Each year here in Leipzig, our host country, Germany, is a wonderful host that gives us great facilities and fantastic hospitality. And it is my pleasure now, on your behalf, to invite our German host, the Minister for Transport and Digital Infrastructure, Mr. Andreas Schreier, please to the stage. Bitte, Herr Minister.
Liebe Freunde,
dear friends, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Great. After this performance, I now have the pleasure of saying my words of welcome, and I have come here without a group of dancers and don't have an image film with me, but nevertheless I can shout out a warm welcome to the wonderful city of Leipzig to you. Welcome to the ITF 2019. Mayor of Leipzig, I think in the future, maybe, in the course of the next 20-25 ITF summits that we will have here in Leipzig and beyond, we should probably put an effort into finding dancing groups and maybe offer a little bit of cultural program to this forum as well. So once again, thank you to our friends from Korea for the great cooperation, the wonderful organization, and this friendly partnership. And Yang Tae Kim, a personal word of thank you to you as Secretary General of the ITF. Thank you very much for the cooperation that has always been based on friendship. 47 countries from all over the world have come to Leipzig. Different cultures, different histories, different challenges and opportunities. But no matter how different we all are, there is one thing that unites us, and that is the desire for good mobility, good logistics, and satisfied citizens. Mobility that is efficient, affordable, simple, and environment-friendly, because we all know that only a kind of mobility that fulfills all these criteria will survive in the future. Taking a look back at my task of the past few days as Minister of Transport of the Federal Republic of Germany, I am actively protecting the climate every day. An alliance for railroad transport, a master plan for shipping the next day, a national cycling plan, a scheme for clean air, and I could go on and on. There are so many things that we're launching now, things that keep mobility fascinating and raise people's curiosity. We are not discussing additional bans and levies and taxes, but trying to find other ways, because we need mobility as the fuel for a powerful economy. For the 12th time in a row, smart minds from all over the world have come to Leipzig to discuss mobility, logistics, and connectivity precisely under that headline. And taking a look at the slogan of this year's summit, then it is connectivity above all, but especially seen from the point of view of the different regions that we all represent. And this is more important than ever before. Equality in life standards, not only a focus on the urban clusters, but focusing on connectivity between cities and regions. And here we also focus on rural areas. In doing so, we relieve the urban clusters from the pressure that they experience. And I think we all see that the world is changing and that we have to face new challenges. Climate change, the speedy growth of our cities, but the digital transformation. All these factors pose a challenge, but not only a challenge. What they really pose is an opportunity, because I believe that problem as a world comes from being in favor of something, because otherwise we would have to call it a controlem. So it is our tasks as experts, as politicians, to make sure that for our citizens, for the industry, for the end customers, we keep offering new things, but also helping people to stop worrying about the future. And many people do worry about the future. There are certain terms that seem to be a trend: artificial intelligence, machine learning, digital transformation, and so on and so forth. And of course, many people are scared and they even protest against these terms when voting, for example, as well. And this is why we have to explain these terms. This is why we have to open up a perspective, and maybe we can sum it up under a positive word. It is progress, and we are obliged to progress so as to support people, be they young or old, living in cities or in urban regions. Progress is a driver of social questions, and my friend, the Vice Minister of Korea, has also focused on the social dimension. Mobility does have a social dimension, indeed, because participation and the opportunities that come with participating in mobility are a driver of wealth and well-being. The drivers that are sometimes maybe not discussed sufficiently outside of the transport community. Mobility is the prerequisite for it, because participation and freedom enable us to lead a good life. 30 years after the wall came down in Germany, we know here that a country can only grow together if people actually meet each other, if they get a chance to get to know each other, if they can exchange their ideas and thoughts and goods. 30 years ago, it was courageous people here in East Germany who made sure that our nation can indeed grow together, and to correct the mistakes that were made after the Second World War. They threw themselves towards a life of freedom, and it was mobility and connectivity that was the decisive factor. Maybe 30 years ago, connectivity was more an analog kind of thing, but nowadays it is both analog and digital growing together. Here in Germany, reuniting our people. This is something that we are very proud of here in Germany, and this is why Leipzig is a venue well chosen. Because here, what belongs together grew together. We're talking about 70 transport projects with a volume of 40 billion euros that we started in 1919, 9 railroad projects, 7 highways, and 1 waterway project. We overcame German separation, and we wanted to close the gap between the two parts of Germany using transport infrastructure. It was transport that was the driver behind it, and now Germany is reunited. In times of populism, of fears, of a trend towards isolation, it is all the more important that here in Leipzig, on the eve of the European elections, it is important to send a signal that we need an open Europe with the free trade, with the freedom of movement. That, for example, you can have a student's exchange via an interrail ticket, because this broadens your horizon. And ladies and gentlemen, I think every European citizen knows the worth of peace that has been lasting for more than 70 years here in Europe. Peace that we must not put at stake. Instead, we need a united Europe, and united can only happen if we talk to each other and not about each other. And as a prerequisite, we need mobility, a kind of mobility that is usable and affordable for everyone, a kind of mobility that serves the industry, the environment, and people. And this is a kind of mobility that allows you to travel all over the world. And this is why I wish all the best to the ITF 2019. And these signals on the eve of European election are very important to myself personally, based on the experiences of a separated Germany. And based on these experiences, now we see well-being and peace in this wonderful Europe. And those who have come to Europe from outside of Europe, you can help us to send a clear signal here from the ITF for the world to grow together. Thank you very much.
We're now going to transition to the working part of our afternoon with two consecutive panels, which will join me presently on the platform. I think Minister Scheuer, and in the earlier presentation also that we had from the Korean presidency, you've touched on something, both of you, which is extremely important. The German experience also through mobility of Germans rediscovering each other after what happened in 1989. The Korean possibility of rediscovering each other after the multiple summits between North and South Korea that point to a different and perhaps better future of engagement. I'm an Irish European, and I come from a country now fearing that we could lose some of the easy mobility we have on our island because of Brexit and its consequences. And so when you think about those things and you know them with some intimacy, this issue of mobility and connectivity and the social as well as the economic consequences are quite dramatic and really powerful. Now, the wonderful thing in our panel this afternoon, in our two panels, we cover most, not all of the globe. You can't do that in any one or two panels. But we're going to cover the United States, the European Union, a view from the Netherlands, the International Maritime Organization, China, the African Union, and the International Air Transport Association. So we're really going to have a lot of really interesting people here talking about their leadership, their views, and their sense of the challenge. I would like now to invite to join me here on the stage Elaine L. Chao, Secretary of Transportation of the United States of America. Yes. Madam Secretary, welcome. The seating arrangements are indicated. I was just double-checking. Violetta Bulc, European Commissioner for Mobility and Transport. Welcome. Stentje van Veldhoven, State Secretary for Infrastructure and Water Management of the Netherlands. Thank you. So you can see we've got a lot of girl power in transport, which is good to see. And Kitak Lim, who is the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization. Thank you. Do you know what? I've got the impression that you Koreans are taking over the world. The Secretary General of the ITF, the Presidency of the ITF, and the Secretary General of the IMO, all Koreans, and all welcome. So, Madam Secretary, it's a really great pleasure that you and your colleagues from the United States have joined today and that you've come here as the Secretary of State for Transportation. I'm going to invite you and each of the panelists for 4 or 5 minutes to lay out what these things are about from your perspective, to follow up with you with 1 or 2 supplementary questions from what you said, and hopefully for a few minutes at the end to have a discussion and an exchange of views across with the panel. But starting with you, Madam Secretary, what is it that you want to bring to this question of connectivity and the direction of mobility and transport policy in the United States, for the United States, in the United States for the wider world, and what is your leadership bringing in terms of ambition action objectives.
Are we allowed to go? Are we allowed to go to the podium?
That's not the plan.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. I understand everyone understood that in the beginning, so I don't set the rules, I follow them. But if it's okay for you to stay here, that's good.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So you want me to answer those questions?
Well, just really,
or?
I mean, I want to leave it open to you to bring us through your agenda in being here in the context of our theme at the conference.
Well, we just had a wonderful World Economic Forum lunch in which we met with stakeholders and government officials on the whole issue about drones. And so we had a good discussion about the future of drones, what the United States is doing in the area of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, and drones. And the United States is actually taking a great deal of leadership in these fronts. Number one, our overall priorities is that safety must always be number one. And number two, we address the infrastructure needs of our country because infrastructure provides the competitiveness and the economic vitality of all our countries, and so it's very important to address. And in the United States, we have about $88 billion every year that we address in infrastructure. And then number three, obviously, we need to be preparing for the future, which is to engage with new emerging transportation technologies in a way that addresses legitimate public concerns about safety, security, and privacy without hampering innovation. So in the United States, we are concerned about the patchwork of state-by-state regulations which may develop. And so we hope that you'll visit our exhibit, the United States exhibit, where there are pamphlets, hard copy pamphlets of our aviation drone policy. And it is not top-down, it is not command and control, because our country is so diverse. We want the communities to develop for themselves what they need, but coordinate at the federal level the regulations which will address the drones. And then, of course, we want to make sure that there is ample opportunities for the private sector to get involved, because in this administration, in this government, we do not believe that the government is the innovator. We can facilitate and make create the environment in which innovation will prevail. And then, of course, we're dealing with autonomous vehicles as well. 94% of accidents occur because of human error. So the promise of automated driving systems, autonomous vehicles, is in fact safer driving. And to two key constituent communities, people with disabilities and the elderly, autonomous vehicles can return freedom to these groups and give them back their mobility. And then, of course, we're very focused on commercial space. That is increasingly a part of the transportation system of the United States and internationally as well. And the United States is very proud to have innovated on the relaunchable rocket, which allows rockets, when sent into space, to return, that return part is really important, safely, and to be reused. And so this innovation has allowed commercial space travel to be reduced in cost quite a bit. So there are lots of things that are going on in the United States, and we look forward to talking with the other panelists and also engaging with the audience on that as well.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. You put up a pretty big menu there. Let me just dip in, if I may, to one of the points to start the conversation. The capacity of autonomous vehicles, what they can bring, you've described, to help people with disabilities, to help the elderly, to provide mobility, to reduce accidents. And the resistance to it is the resistance that you get to any new technologies, and anxieties about the judgments that autonomous vehicles may be making and so on. What are the...
We're actually more forgiving of human error but it seems that we're not very forgiving if a machine makes it.
Exactly. And so I was going to ask, what do you think, from your perspective, are the key issues confronting early or wide-scale adoption of these technologies, which by and large are now available, but they're not widely applied?
Well, 71% of Americans get very nervous when you tell them that they're going to be getting into a driverless vehicle. So we try to avoid the word driverless. We try to say self-driving. That ameliorates the anxiety a little bit. But I speak very candidly with manufacturers of cars and also Silicon Valley, the source of such innovation in new technology. And I say to them that I charge them, I challenge them, that they have got to share their confidence and their knowledge with the rest of America, and in fact, the rest of the world. Because I say that consumer acceptance will be the key to the success of their vision of the transportation systems of the world in the future.
You made a very interesting point, and I'm sure Commissioner Bulch will feel some sympathy with it. When you come to regulate, at what level you regulate, you talked about the federal and the state, to do with the appropriate regulatory environment, for example, for insurance companies and so on, who will regulate that? Is it being regulated? And what is your policy about those accommodating circumstances that permit the rollout of driverless vehicles?
I think overall, from a federal point of view, we have to, again, address legitimate public concerns about safety, privacy, security without hampering innovation. We can make the world very, very safe. We just tell everybody to stop in their tracks and don't move. That obviously is not the goal. So that's the balance. How do we regulate, but without hampering innovation? And our country is very different. It's very decentralized. So for example, the insurance issue. Traditionally, insurance has always been regulated at the local and state level. So we expect that that will still continue. But larger issues about cross-boundary, automated driving systems or drones, that is why we have this new policy approach in which we coordinate and together with the local entities address some of the cross-border and national issues. But there will be some, like the insurance, which will be domestic, which would take on the traditions of our past, which is that insurance is always done locally. Sure. But as we go forward, I also think that the pace of change will be faster than what some people like, but slower than expected by others. Yes. And so that will give us the opportunity to work out some of these issues, like the insurance issues that we are working on right now.
Let me ask you on the question of drones. The ones we see in the movies are kind of zapping bad guys and all that kind of thing. What are the big civilian uses of drones that you see? And again, to do the issue of adapting the technology and adopting the technology to multiple uses, to safe uses, and to uses particularly in concentrated urban zones, where one wonders, will we replicate an air jam like we have a traffic jam today?
Well, that's our job, isn't it? Number one, the drones are very, very helpful. In hazardous environments, circumstances where it is unsafe to send human beings, drone inspections can be very helpful. For example, inspections of electric utility lines, inspection of nuclear power plants. Our country is vast. We have huge areas of forest and land mass, and so drones are a very effective way to check on infrastructure. So another example is when we had the hurricanes, Harvey, Maria, and Irma. Especially, for example, in Puerto Rico, where the infrastructure was basically destroyed. We needed to be able to have a way to survey the destruction so that we can rebuild. And that has been, the drones were wonderful. California forest fires, we obviously cannot send people, do not want to send firefighters into areas we are unsure of. And so the drones, again, can offer tremendous aerial surveillance and intelligence and information as to what to do. So the drones can do so many things on a commercial and governmental basis that can be very helpful. And then, what was the other part again?
Well, really it's just the traffic jam stuff.
Oh,
I
yes.
just wondered about
Well,
it because,
I
again,
think-
one sees in some of the more dystopian presentations.
Well, the other thing I was going to mention is, we have recently given, and I don't want to give an endorsement to this company, so I'm not going to name it, but you can find out which one it is. It's the wealthiest company in the world, and that delivers packages. You know which one that is. And so,
That's a hard one.
so we have actually given them, begun to give them on a test pilot their ability to actually deliver packages.
Okay.
We also have now 1.5 million drones. We have 135,000 drone operators, a new job category that did not exist until 5 years ago. And currently, we have restrictions that disallow drones from flying over the heads of people, out of the line of sight, at night, and we're giving waivers manually. Now, this is not sustainable. So we have 10 pilot projects going on in different climatic areas, different geographic areas, to test these conditions in which they have the opportunity to do that. And then we are thinking about how to give these waivers on a more automated basis.
Okay.
But then also, once again, we need to safely integrate the drones into the national airspace. Drones are currently 400 feet below. That's obviously insufficient. So our challenge now for everyone is how do we integrate drones safely into the national airspace?
One final thing on that issue, we saw in some of the British airports, total chaos to do with whatever and whoever. There's a lot of whoever out there doing whatever, and not all of it is good stuff. Drones and security, drones and insecurity. How is the federal administration tackling that question in the United States?
You wouldn't be surprised that the law enforcement officers, our community, are the most concerned. So we're now thinking about a remote ID system. Currently, drones have IDs, but it takes a while. So we need to upgrade that skill to be able to know immediately, like we do aircrafts. What is their ID, the make, the particulars, whatever. So we're working on that as well. But obviously, Defense Department is concerned. The law enforcement community is concerned. And we had recently passed something called the FAA reauthorization, which set forth conditions in which there would be lawful engagement by the law enforcement authorities and also the Defense Department.
Madam Secretary, thank you for a fascinating tour d'horizon. Thank you so much. Let me turn, if I could, to Commissioner Violeta Bulc. This issue, Madam Commissioner, of connectivity has, through your portfolio, a very big internal EU programme to do with the trans-European networks and a growing interest in the connections beyond the borders of Europe. Could you talk to us about the inside and inside-out dimensions of those connectivity preferences?
How many days do we have?
You've got a quickie.
No, of course, connectivity is one of the 3 key priorities of European transport, besides being also efficiency and dealing with negative externalities. What does it mean, connectivity, for us? Within EU, this is the prerequisite for all member states to take a full advantage of the single market. And here we have these famous 9 corridors that connect all member states. And by 2030, we will complete all 9 corridors under the same standards, with the same type of signaling, with the same kind of legal frameworks. And I'm really excited about that, because that will give an additional huge boost for all European citizens in order to take the full advantage of this incredible peace project as European Union is. But of course, this is not enough. In order to really play an important global role as the leading global power, of course, we need to be connected to all the global markets that we can engage with and develop future collaborations. That's why equally important as the internal drive for a full connectivity and modern connectivity, we have equal ambitions on a global scale. And probably at this point, it's better to focus on European plans to connect globally. and of course invite you that we join forces and engage and deliver even more in that aspect. And I can just walk you around the globe very quickly. First, I'm very proud of being able to finally connect with our neighborhoods. Connectivity with Western Balkans under the Community Treaty was a very important first step, which means now that the entire region is aligning the European standards and regulatory frameworks to be able to engage and open joint standards for logistic networks, for passenger services, but of course as well for the industry to be able to deliver all these projects. Then we move to the Eastern Partnership, where also the extension of so-called TEN-T networks, these 9 corridors, has been delivered. Again, we will continue to strive for standardization and to be able to bring as much investments in the region as possible to fully engage then on the entire seamless transport network. But that's not enough. I'm very happy that I have my colleague from African Union here, because lately we really made some substantial progress to engage with the African Union and also try to pass all really good experiences to stimulate similar TEN-T network for Africa, because connectivity for Africa is essential to bring the economy back, to bring the engagement with African people. Of course, in addition to that, we are putting special attention to aviation, railways, and road safety, which are the common challenges, and we can find good deliverables together on these issues. But equally important is our engagement with Middle East, Jordan, all Gulf countries. Again, here the focus is aviation and railways, where we jointly plan and, of course, engage in the planning phases in order to extend our connectivity beyond what exists today. But what I'm very excited is that finally there are some very concrete deliverables also on a comprehensive engagement with Asia. When I'm talking about Asia, of course, I have in mind China and the connectivity platform with China. We just, a couple of days ago, we also signed 2 additional commitments for aviation engagement in industrial engagement, which means BASA agreement, on horizontal agreement for the services, and also very ambitious joint projects to add additional land connectivity with Asia, on rail. So we are jointly now co-financing the analysis of potential new railway connectivity within Europe and Asia. And the exciting part is that not only point to point, but bringing all the countries along the corridor on board to plan together, and also to encourage then the comprehensive networks of all countries that are along this corridor to come on board and, of course, spread this connectivity options and bring wealth to the entire region. So that will, I think, will in the future have also political consequences, bringing people closer together, bringing all the nations on this route, and engage in an economical sense, trade, tourism, but also people to people on the research and innovation projects. If that is not enough, let's move towards also Japan, our latest, the most comprehensive trade agreement that includes also sustainability factors and human factors in it, is also now paving the way for closer connectivity, especially in aviation. And we move towards then Eurasia, and especially would like to bring the long-lasting quality partnership with the United States and Canada, where we have been mostly focusing on aviation, and I'm looking forward to join forces, because US and Europe are now the leading forces also in the development of especially regulatory and standardizations in the field of drones. I hope we will join our forces together, and on ICAO level also bring this incredible potential as fast as possible as a united sort of standardized opportunity, and that will be a prerequisite for us in order to really bring drones on board as one of the multimodal solutions. Of course, I would like to point out two very important elements at the end. Incredibly productive cooperation with IMO and ICAO. These are two global organizations that really help us to bring connectivity on a much higher level, especially in a sense of standardization in decarbonization, standardization in security, in safety, having a unified global approach, because after all, we are all part of the big planetary village. We all share this beautiful planet, and if we don't get global agreements on the global businesses, then we are not delivering really well. So this is, in a sense, this global connectivity that is really making the world small, making the world really nearby, and bringing this conscious, in our consciousness, really understanding that through cooperation, through engagement, where transport, energy, and digital infrastructure is the prerequisite, we will never engage in fight with each other, but we will really strive for peaceful societies that can deliver high values. And all that we can bring then on the national level, on a local level, and make sure that it's interoperable and it can engage on all these different levels based on the interest and needs. This is a short story.
Commissioner, that's the short version of a story, so it's obviously one that has considerable substance and depth behind it. I'd like to pick out, if I could, one thing I think it would be of interest to our audience, and because we're followed on the next panel with the Transport Minister from China. Talk to us briefly about EU and Belt and Road Initiative, because there's a great fascination with its possibilities and some fascination with its challenges.
Of course, this is one of the most dynamic areas right now, but not only because EU and China are involved, because also all the countries along this connectivity between TEN-T and Road and Belt initiative. And this is a good example how two global powers can really productively cooperate and bring prosperity to many, not only two of us. What is the challenge there? First of all, we have very different, we had at the beginning, different approaches to understanding what connectivity is all about. So what we did, we created some sort of connectivity platform where every 6 months we've been improving understanding of each other and looking for ways how to align our standards and regulatory frameworks, and then of course also engage in the concrete projects, those that I already mentioned before. I'm very happy that after a long and lasting year after year negotiations, a couple of weeks ago, EU and China were able to sign a very ambitious sort of cooperation agreement that is based on reciprocity, level playing field, on open regulatory engagement, public procurement, and these are the fundamental elements that help us to develop trust in each other, that help us to really look then for projects where also we can engage as co-investors. I don't want to sound too sweet, yeah? Because of course challenges are many. We have two ambitious economies that are trying to compete globally, but at the same time cooperate globally. So, but trust is the one that is the essence of such a cooperation. Similar one that we in the past developed with US, and that really showed incredible progress in aviation. We can be grateful to these two economies that they were able to push aviation on such a high level. So I do hope that with the same kind of results, we will deliver connectivity between Europe and Asia on land and find many new opportunities. What is the core issue? Standards under which we engage, regulatory alignments under which we will jointly invest. And as I said, we are walking the path carefully, but building the trust more and more. And I hope that in a couple of years' time, very concrete projects will be delivered. We put a lot of hopes into this new joint railway analysis that we are conducting, and that will really be a fundamental document for future investment engagements as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think those issues that you emphasise at the end, trust, standards and regulatory alignment, are really interesting issues, and we can of course pick them up later in conversation.
Could I just add why is this so important? Because of course economy of volume and economy of scale is very important in our business. Through standards we create sort of predictable environment, and that's how we hope to bring ambitious investments on board. Without that, of course, the investments are hampered and they don't deliver on the needs. So that's really a strong driver in that.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm very conscious that we started late, we ran a bit over, and my train is not running on time, but in any event, we'll press on. I want to move, if I could, and thank you for that intervention, Commissioner, to Stentje van Veldhoven, who is the State Secretary from the Netherlands. You personally, but also the Netherlands, has been very active in the combination of mobility and sustainability. And I might ask you to pick up that thread and elaborate, please.
Well, thank you very much for that occasion. I think Secretary Chao talked about anxiety and also public acceptance. And I would like to add a third one, which is being responsible for transport and environment, impatience. We are going to a world with 10 billion people. And this morning we heard that transport, the figures are going up by 60%. And we'll have to do all of this within the remits of the Paris Agreement. So we have an incredible task to do. And we need to deliver on lowering CO2 in transport, which is, by the way, not just good for climate, but also very good for public health because of all the emissions that we avoid. So we need to deliver on lowering CO2. And if I say we, then I literally mean we, because it's up to us. It's up to this generation. And if you are sitting in this room, that means that you are sitting in a seat where you can make a difference. And we need to get a move on. 2020 needs to be the start of a decade of acceleration and ambition across all modes of transport. And there will be no silver bullet. We will need everything. And the solutions will also differ from country to country. It will look differently in the Netherlands than it will look in Chile or Morocco. We spoke about it this morning, and it's such a valid point. We need to accommodate for this growth in transport all around the world, and it will look different, but it will all need to be with a lower carbon footprint. So we need to stop discussing if we're going to do it, but how we're going to do it, because that means that we direct our energy to finding the solutions. And parts of the solutions were already mentioned here by the previous speakers. Standardization, innovation is going to be crucial. Drones will play a role. Cooperation, crucial. Public acceptance. If we don't have public acceptance, we will go nowhere. The Netherlands is very committed to reaching the Paris goals. We are preparing a package for reducing our CO2 emissions by 49% in 2030, and mobility is a crucial part of this. We need to move faster, and that means that we need to cooperate. Because I can move faster in my parliament, and I'm sure my colleagues can move faster in their parliaments, and business leaders can move faster in their boardrooms if they can show that others are going in the same direction. We need the economies of scale, as the Commissioner rightly pointed out. We need to move faster. So connectivity, for me, is all about alliances. And I think tomorrow we're also going to talk about the multilateral quota system, which can play a big role. I think also the COP25 in Chile can play a big role. We need to be committed, and I hope to be committed with all partners. Cooperation is not something which is desirable. It is something which is essential. Together we can go so far. And I must say, I am very much committed. The Netherlands is very committed. And basically, I'm also counting on you to be committed, because together we can really tackle that challenge with all of the other benefits and reasons why transport is so crucial, which have been so eloquently outlined by the other speakers that I will not repeat them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that intervention. Let me ask you, I know you said, and it's exactly correct, that not everyone can have the same solution because not everyone starts with the same nature of the problem. But as regards actions, what are, just for Netherlands, and so given the commitment you described, what are the top 3 actions Netherlands will do in the transport domain to deliver the kinds of things you're looking at?
Can I mention 4? Because my package actually falls into 4 parts.
4 quickies, yes.
4 quickies, yes. Well, first is electric vehicles, which also includes hydrogen, by the way. We are stimulating the development, the take-up in our market, because if you want to have zero-emission fleet by 2050, you need to stop adding fossil-fueled cars to your fleet by around 2030. So that's number 1. Then second, biofuels. And I know there's many concerns about biofuels, and we need to be careful about biofuels, but I think in shipping and air transportation, they will still be the solution to green the current fleet for quite a while. So we need to develop innovative biofuels that will not compete with food. Third is everything in logistics. We are going to try and decrease carbon emissions in our logistics by creating zero-emission zones together with the logistics sectors in 30 to 40 cities in the Netherlands, also to decrease air pollution in those areas that are most densely populated. And I'm stressing the cooperation with the logistics sector because we really do this together. We could not do it as a government. This is something that you can only do if you cooperate really well with all your logistic partners. And I want to thank them too for being as courageous as they are. And then the fourth is personal mobility in the context of employees. We are working together with large employers, driving their employee CO2 emissions, lowering them by using more public transport, by using more bikes. Our secret weapon against congestion too in our largely densely populated areas by using public transport and by also investing in e-mobility. So those are the 4 blocks, and we will need all of them if we want to reach our target, but none of them are as intrusive that people are afraid of it. If you work together, if you work on public acceptance, if you work with the partners, you can find the solutions that are acceptable to them too. And that is the way, so bottom up, I think, as was also explained by Ms. Chow, is really the way to go.
Thank you. I think we all know your secret weapon, because it's pretty dangerous to cross the road in front of cyclists in Amsterdam or any of the Dutch cities that one might visit. Let me turn, if I could, to Kitak Lim, the Secretary General of the IMO. You've listened to 3 policy leaders, and you give your own leadership through the IMO, a UN organization. What, right now, are the big and the tough issues that you're trying to deal with at IMO level, where the leadership of people on a panel like this feeds in and contributes to achieving your objectives?
Thank you, Mr. Cox, moderator. First of all, I'm very happy and glad because IMO every year create our campaign catchphrase for this year, 2019, which is empowering women in maritime community.
You picked a good year.
So we have 4 panelists. I'm one. I'm very happy. So we want to promote the campaign as much as possible within the maritime community. And when it comes to your question, first of all, I'd like to mention about the nature of work of IMO. IMO is one of 15 specialized agencies of UN system deal with the main shipping issues. But as you know, the shipping is transporting by volume more than 80% of the goods and material around the world. So it is contributing greatly global trade and the global economy. At the same time, shipping together with the port industry should be or believed to be very crucial part of a global supply chain, global logistics. That's why that is directly relevant to the connectivity. So shipping port, is a crucial part in terms of promote and enhance global connectivity. Shore and sea, land and sea. So we are doing ourselves to our best work our performance by our organization. Having said that, we are having within our work, mainly we are dealing safety and environment protection measure and security relevant to the international shipping. At the same time, what we are doing, we have a facilitation convention, which is facilitating all procedure in the interface between shipping and the port, mainly taking place in the port harbor area. Standardized in the documentation and standardized procedure in and relevant custom, port authority, immigration, etc. And then also we are doing to promote the information sharing, providing single window. It is one of the key issues of the European Union, very relevant. So we're promoting the single window system to share information. Also, we are dealing with also safety of navigation and also information providing system, as you mentioned. So we are contributing by our work to the promoting global trade and global connectivity. So this is what we are doing. And we are going to promote this kind of activity relevant to connectivity more than before. This is also relevant to the some initiative by China, the One Belt and Road, the BRI. United Nations Secretary General, he mentioned very clearly there is a common ground between United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 17 and BRI. This is, the helping all relevant, government or country to promote, improve their economic condition and to promote trade, promote the connectivity. Very relevant to the Sustainable Development Goals. So BRI and also relevant connectivity. So IMO, we deal with the policies such as connecting in terms of maritime Silk Road. So in that sense, we are promoting that kind of activities within our work. And the second one, as mentioned the previous speakers, we are having contentious issues, climate change issues. It has been a lot of discussion, and eventually Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015, based on which we are developing a lot. Last year, April, 1 year ago, IMO adopted the initial strategy to meet the target and the policy of a Paris Agreement. There has been lot of contentious discussion, confrontation among member states, NGO, the industry as well. But we successfully adopted the initial strategy 1 year ago. There was a lot of conversation, and also we had a lot of conversation among member states and between member states, the industry as well. A lot of dialogue. And together with the regional organization from different parts of the world, particularly I would mention and also appreciate good cooperation with European Union, European Commission. Here you have the one panelist, Ms. Bulk, is very strong the partner to IMO. Really appreciate the good cooperation and dialogue. Those one was successful based on mutual understanding, developed country, developing country, and industry as well, and mutual trust. So we are very proud of that. Last week, we had, based on initial strategy, with a very important progress with an aim to finalize our strategy by 2023. So we have to finalize our strategy, including mandatory measure by 2023. Last week, a very successful technical or policy area as well. So I'm very, very proud of we are very proud of the progress which happened last week. And based on that one, we will continue more discussion, more dialogue session this year and next year with the aim to make it, necessary arrangement, including legally binding mental issues as well. It is on the way, on the track. So really appreciate all member states and all regional organizations, like including European Commission. And also, I have to mention about, like the Secretary, Ms. Chow mentioned, we are talking about autonomous ships. Autonomous ships are very complicated issues, but we are developing our clear policy. Those policy survey and about the future policy will be finalized 2020, actually next year. So we are having lots of investigation, analysis about the current legal system, including safety, environment protection, human element, and the compensation as well, including legal aspect as well. All those projects and exercise will be completed by 2020. Then we will develop our own policy. At the moment, we have 4 grades of automation. First and the second, third. Final 4th grade is actually unmanned ships. But it causes a lot of the complicated, delicate issues, including safety and legal aspect as well. But it is moving well. And at the same time, when it comes to automation of ships, we are considering taking into consideration like 1.6 million seafarers working around the world. How impact, would impact the seafarers' future, profession, and how we stabilize the operation of a shipping company. There will be a lot of collaboration between the shore and the sea, ships and the sea, and including port area. One of the items I have to mention is that we are very, very concerned about the cyber security. Ship is different from automobile. Huge size, quite sometimes very dangerous, critically dangerous cargos. So we are very, very concerned about cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is also underway. Nowadays, automation taking place, disruptive digitalization, technology, all taking place in combined way. So we are developing that issues as well. And also, I'd like to mention, this is relevant to the all connectivity and the environment and safety as well. Relevant to the climate change, inevitably, due to the change of the weather environment, there is more possibility for us to use Arctic waters. So Arctic actually ice is continuously melting down, so we have to stop, but it's taking place. But in a sense, there is some more possibility to see more transit through the Arctic waters, more ships. So there is a lot of trial, the sailing through the Arctic waters. What I'm going to say is that we have to see the possibility to use Arctic waters. At the same time, we says Arctic water is the most vulnerable environment, safety environment, most vulnerable. At the same time, like a hydrographic survey, it is not much well developed. Maybe less than 30% are surveyed actually. A lot of concern about safety, telecommunication, and the search and rescue, and the compensation, all things should be developed more than now. That's why recently IMO applied for the observer membership to Arctic Council. So 2 weeks ago, last week we received official letter from Arctic Council. Arctic Council received the IMO as observer member. So we are strengthening dialogue with the Arctic Council to look up the relevant issues. That is all issues which is underway by the IMO. But basically, one point I'd like to mention, In the course of that, our work, we have been emphasizing a lot more than before capacity building over developing countries. So developing countries, is one of the important, element we have to look after. In that sense, last week, when it comes to the climate change issue, luckily, IMO adopted the policy, establishing maritime climate change trust fund. So we adopted the trust fund thanks to the good support of member states, particularly from European Union, support that one. So with that one, we invite the voluntary donation from member states and this as well. With that, we will try to help the developing country and the small island, the developing countries. For that, they can adapt more easily to change of the climate change issue. So that is generally what's taking place at IMO.
Secretary General, you've given it again a pretty broad outline. Time has caught up with me. I apologise to everyone on the panel. I hoped we could deep dive a bit more. We can't do that. I would ask you please to show your appreciation for our excellent panel and for their contribution. And I invite you please to take your seats again. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Madam Secretary, thank you very much indeed. Madam State Secretary. And Mr. Secretary General, thank you. Now we're going to transition, not thematically, but geographically and institutionally, to our second panel. And indeed, some of the themes which came up, I think, are extremely relevant. The question of capacity building, I think, is something will be interesting to touch on in our second panel, particularly to do with our representative from African Union, who are busily engaged in the whole process of building up a Pan-African capacity in so many fields. And I would like, also I think, we've had several references already to progress between EU and China, for example, on the Belt and Road Initiative, the remarks of the Secretary General of the United Nations to do with SDG number 17, Strategic Development Goal number 17, and the Belt and Road Initiative, and a remark about a maritime Silk Road. So it makes great sense to segue and to invite here to join me Mr. Zhao Peng Li, the Minister of Transport from China. Minister. Her Excellency Amani Abu Zaid, who is the Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy of the African Union. Welcome.
Thank you. More power.
And Mr. Alexandre de Juniac, the Director General and the CEO of IATA, the International Air Transport Association. I do not propose, Minister, to change the procedure that we've adopted so far. I invite you, as I try to untangle here one of these headsets, to connect us to China's thinking on the issue of connectivity. We know already that you have major program, that you have major ambitions, and you're just recently after hosting another summit in Beijing. So it seems to me a good point of departure is to ask you, what are you doing arising from that summit, and what should we expect for the future?
Thank you very much, Mr. Cox. It's my honor and a pleasure to attend this year's summit. Just now, we watched the excellent opening, and we also listened to the excellent conversation for the first round of panel discussion. Mr. Cox talked about and mentioned BRI Summit. In the past April, Chinese government successfully hosted the second summit of the BRI initiative. In Mr. President Xi's keynote speech, the key to BRI is connectivity. Interconnectivity is the theme of this summit. This is not a coincidence, this is a consistency. The BRI initiative has significance and connection with many countries' development strategy, development projects, and development policies. It also has direct relationship with the theme with this year's summit. I would like to say the BRI initiative was started by China, but the outcomes and the opportunities of BRI belong to the whole world. China is willing to work with colleagues, to work with the rest of the world to focus on key projects, key policies to exercise pragmatic cooperation. Like what was mentioned by the EU Commissioner, to increase mutual trust, to carry out all types of cooperation in a transparent, equitable way should be the way forward. The cooperation should be carried out in openness, and we need to achieve win-win in the process of cooperation. I would like to reiterate that BRI was started in China, but the opportunities of a BRI belong to the world. Let's come to the situation in China. In China, there is an old saying that goes like this: if you want to get rich, you have to build roads first. In the 1990s, China suffered from lousy transport infrastructure, seeing economic and social development being restricted and observing grave bottleneck impact on development. At that time, transport was the bottleneck to the economic development and the uplifting of people's living standard. After 1978, the opening up and reform policy was carried out after 40 years of efforts. China now boasts of a historic transformation from bottleneck restriction to overall sufficiency. By the end of 2018, China's railway operating mileage was 131,000 kilometers, of which high-speed rail is nearly 29,000 kilometers. The total mileage of highways is 4.85 million kilometers, including 142,000 kilometers of high-speed expressways. 2,373 berths in ports above the designated size have the capacity to handle cargo ships with 10,000 deadweight tonnage. There are 235 civil aviation airports in China. 37 airports could throughput 10 million passengers per year. So we see the modern network of transport has come into being. We have to realize, however, we still have a long way to go. The task before us is arduous. The Chinese government is committed to opening up more to technological innovation and management innovation. The purpose is to push forward the demand side and the supply side reform to give development of transport a new boost and momentum, providing a better basis and incentive for the better development of a Chinese economy. Using today's opportunity, I would like to mention that the second UN Global Sustainable Transport Conference will be held in Beijing in May 2020. I'm cordially inviting the guests here to attend the conference. I'm looking forward to seeing you again in Beijing next year. Thank you.
Let me, if I may, ask you one or two questions. You have given these phenomenal statistics about the growth of infrastructure in China. And you talk about the need to continue with these developments. We also know that you and Chinese authorities are extremely aware of the very high concentrations of pollution and air quality issues in your urban areas. What is your perspective for reconciling these two things? The staggering growth, which has no precedent in human history, and the staggering downside effect of extraordinary degrees of unsustainable pollution with health and other spillover effects.
What I would like to say is that the purpose of transport is to serve the people. At the same time, it is a huge consumer of energy and a big producer of pollution. It's not just the case in China. The same situation happens in other countries. We pay high attention to this issue. The Chinese government has a series of policies, measures, legal measures, and instruments to promote the sustainable development and green development of transport, to help the transport to be greener, to protect the environment, to seek a sustainable development. First of all, in terms of the legal system and framework, we have promulgated a series of laws, orders, and decrees. With these laws and decrees, relevant industry players could promote themselves to protect the environment and grow greener. Secondly, in our 5-year plan, even a longer-term planning, in some project planning, we pay high attention to the issue of environmental protection. We have taken a series of measures to reinforce our efforts on environmental protection. Thirdly, in the operation and in the management, in the administration, we focus on the implementation of relevant laws and decrees. Ms. Chow from the United States of America mentioned autonomous driving, and the minister from the Netherlands mentioned environmental protection. Mr. Ki-Tak Lim, Secretary General of IMO, also mentioned what IMO is doing to protect the environment. All these measures, as mentioned by these distinguished representatives, are being done in China. We have achieved quite significant outcome. For example, in public transport system, we promote clean energy application, including EVs and natural gas burning vehicles. In the general public, we try to improve their awareness on greener mobility. These are specific examples of our measures. We have a planning, we have a legal protection instruments. With all these efforts from all stakeholders, we will achieve a series of new achievements in terms of protecting the environment.
Thank you, Minister. Let me turn, if I may, to Dr. Amani Abu-Zeid, who deals in her role with African Union, I think, with an enormous portfolio. You have energy, transport, tourism, ICT in that package.
Tourism.
Yes. So on the connectivity question and Africa's aspirations, and also Africa's current success stories, where would you like to point our attention?
Thank you very much, and let me start by saying that I'm very happy to be here, and I hope, as I said this morning, that this will be one of many participations of the African Union in this very important event. I don't know whether all the audience knows what the African Union is, exactly like the European Union, a little bit better sometimes. Anyway, why I'm saying this? Because the African Union has all African states as members. So 55 member states. We are the political setup of the continent, and our aspiration is the integration of the continent. So one united, integrated, peaceful, prosperous continent is our vision. And you can then deduct or guess very easily that transportation is the translation, is the physical representation of this integration. This is how important transport is for the African Union and for the African Union vision. So this is one. And yes, I know that in the general rhetoric and even sometimes, by so-called experts, Africa comes as, a challenging story. But I would like also to highlight some of the achievements and the good stories about Africa that probably do not always make the news. Africa has launched last year, in March, the African Free Trade Area, which is going to be, this July, is going to be the largest free trade area in the world. This is something that was achieved in under 1 year, and it happened in Africa. Africa also has launched the Single African Air Transport Market. 28 countries are now effectively implementing the Single African Air Transport Market. Africa is digitalizing at very high rate, probably the highest or the fastest growth rate of internet penetration in the world, in addition to the mobile penetration, which is, again, giving a different dimension to transport as we talk about transport on the continent. So these are some of the really beautiful stories that we would like to highlight, which also mean that we have to ensure that they are effective and they are effectively implemented and helping the growth and the industrialization of the continent and the prosperity and the well-being of people as we would like to. Now come to transport. Transport still, the cost of transport, in African transport, in African export, is still the highest in the world. We talk about 30, 50%, the transport component, as opposed to 20% in other parts of the world. The losses when it comes to inefficiencies are estimated at around $170 billion a year, in terms of inefficiencies due in the transport system. Some of the transport modes are still challenging, and especially the roads. Roads are important for Africa, especially in rural areas, in landlocked countries. We have in 16 landlocked countries. We are keen to make sure that these countries, but also within the countries, the rural areas are connected to markets. So whether they are markets at the national level, at the regional or continental level, but also across continents. And then brings me then to what Her Excellency Commissioner Bulc said earlier. We're working with the European Union on the connectivity issues and on transport. We're working with China on the Belt and Road, and we're working with other partners across the continent. I see Turkey here as well. So in terms of transport and connectivity. Drones were mentioned earlier by Her Excellency, the Secretary of State, from the US. Happy to say also that Africa has the first drones airport in the world. And drones in Africa deliver vaccines.
This is Rwanda, is it?
It is in Rwanda. Yeah. It is in Rwanda. We expect that drones are going to constitute 10 to 15% of transport in Africa within the next decade. Now we're working on the lifting power and on regulations. So there are so many things to be said about transport in Africa. Now another challenge is climate change. Climate, we have to remember, and only the last 2 months we had a cyclone, a major one in southern Africa. Climate resilient infrastructure is still a challenge for the continent, a continent that has the lowest, or contributed lowest in the world in terms of emissions, now is suffering most when it comes to climate change. So this is where we need the climate resilient infrastructure. Very happy that Imo has mentioned gender. And yes, this is a very important topic, and we want to make sure that is included in our debates. Women in shipping industry, only 1%, Mr. Secretary General, unacceptable. This is why we launched last month the African Network for Women in Infrastructure. We are particularly also looking at the maritime and shipping industries because they have the lowest in terms of women participation in, compared to other sectors. I can go on and on, just fire away when it comes to questions or comments. But the African story is a fantastic one. And when I talk about challenges, you can also reverse the picture and talk about opportunities for investments. So that's why also more of a reason for us working on the improving the investment climate on the continent. And it's a call also for investment and partnership.
Thank you. Well, that's a high energy act from a High Commissioner for those issues, and thank you very much for it. I think it's wonderful to have that positive perspective that things are moving and in a very positive direction. I've just one question, if I may. I was interested in listening to Commissioner Bulc refer to the fact that quite recently the EU and China kind of concluded between the two entities a perspective on how their engagement would develop. Is the relationship with China and BRI in Africa project-specific, or is there a more institutionalized relationship with African Union and the People's Republic of China?
Traditionally, China's involvement on the continent was bilateral. It's only recently that we have seen an expression from Chinese authorities into regional and transcontinental projects. So this is where the African Union comes in. And only last summer, it was probably the first time that we officially hear from China at the highest level. So His Excellency, the President of China, during the FOCAC meeting, whether in his speech, also bilaterally with the African Union, insisted and reiterated the wish of China to work with the African Union specifically on regional and transcontinental projects. And we started already developing the plan with Africa, taking into consideration the Belt and Road grant scheme. And on the 30th of May, so within a few days, again, we have another meeting, again, to refine our thinking in terms of how we move forward on these, in these sectors with China specifically.
No,
but with since you mentioned Commissioner Bulc, we have already developed it's a historic partner of the African Union, and however, within the sector of transport, especially, we have developed a task force. I think today after the session, we'll be concluding our report in terms of partnership in transport sector.
Super. No, because I think the really important thing is with the transcontinental ambitions you've described, these conversations on a regional and not just bilateral basis really matter, because it's the joined up writing. Let me turn, if I could, to Alexandre de Juniac. You've been listening to the conversation as it's evolved. New technological issues, urgent climate issues, safety issues. You've got them all on your plate. Could you give a comment really on all of the above, a quick comment, forgive me for the pressure, but I would appreciate your view on those things.
The comment is the following. Connectivity for the airlines and air transport is absolutely key. It's key. It's key today. It will be key in the next 30 years. We transport 4.6 billion people now. We will quadruple that in 2050. We'll double that in 2035, quadruple in 2050. So connectivity is at the heart of our industry. But the conditions for that, and to be able, to enable that growth, we have three conditions. Safety. We are the safest long-distance transportation mean, but it's not by chance. It's because it's an obsession of everyone in this industry. And it's also because we have set up a very good cooperation between regulators, governments, industry. And we know, because we have had two tragic accidents recently that have shown everyone that safety is not a given. Never. It's never a given. And it will be, and we will restore confidence in our industry, in the fact that we are the safest mean, by cooperation between regulator, industry, airlines. And open cooperation. I know it's what the FAA is doing currently and very well. But we have to do it. Secondly, second condition, infrastructure. Without infrastructure, connectivity will not exist. And frankly, I have to share, and everybody knows, I always flag the risk of having an infrastructure shortage everywhere in the world, whether it's air traffic control or whether it's airports. So second point. Third point is sustainability. I will just insist on that. Aviation has always been, the industry for the dreams. We have all dreamed to fly. Now, we are designated as the kind of responsible of all CO2 emissions. Well, first of all, it's a bit unfair. We represent 2% of the emissions.
All aviation CO2 emissions.
Yeah. It's 2% of the global emissions. And secondly, the other point everyone has to be aware of, we are the first industry in the world, the first one in history, to have committed 10 years ago to reduce our emissions. And to have convinced 193 states, which is not always a given, sorry for that, to adopt a worldwide program, which is called CORSIA, within the framework of the UN, of the ICAO agency. We are the only industry to have done that.
Let me ask you on that.
And it's a key point for us. It's our license to grow, to be able to demonstrate that we are sustainable. And we will do it.
I don't know, if I take it per aircraft or per passenger mile or whatever, I guess you can point to really solid evidence of a reduction in emissions. But then you point to dramatic growth rates, which per force push the emissions up for reasons of the growth in volume, even if you've unit improvements.
But the commitments we've made, the commitment is to reduce our emission in 2050 by 2 compared to 2005, including the growth.
How will that be done, do you think?
I will tell you. First of all, everybody
Plan
will work.
B, please.
No, everybody will work. So regulators, air traffic control, aircraft manufacturers, airline, everyone. And we ask government to invest in efficient infrastructure. Just an example. In Europe, last summer, we have accumulated almost 18 million minutes of delays, 30 years, and 36 years. And do you believe how high were the CO2 emissions due to these delays? Totally useless? A waste of carbon?
None.
Well, it's a big number. It's a big number. So we urge governments, please invest in efficient infrastructure. We will do our job in having optimized operations. And thirdly, we ask governments, please, it will be possible if you invest in developing the infrastructure for biofuels, which are not based on agriculture, but that is absolutely key if you want us to reduce our carbon footprint. We must have biofuels at a reasonable cost and in every airport. Currently, it's not the case. Yeah. So help us. We have very ambitious targets, an enormous program. We will make it provided we have a contribution from governments.
Well, Camille, that is it's a very clear perspective. I thank you for it. Again, my apologies for being slightly rushed. Could I ask you please to show your appreciation for Minister Zhao Peng Li, Her Excellency Amani Abu Ziyad, and Alexandre de Juniac. This brings our opening session to a conclusion. Thank you. I'm getting you off just about on time for the next sessions, even though we're running late. Thank you for your participation, and thank all those of you who've contributed.